Tulsa's under a new regime as Kevin Wilson has come over from Ohio State to take over the Golden Hurricanes after Phil Montgomery was fired after a 5-7 year at Tulsa in 2022. Montgomery finished with a 43-53 record in his 8 years at Tulsa and missed a bowl appearance in 2022. In fact, Tulsa's not made a bowl game in the last 4 out of 6 seasons. The last bowl game for Tulsa was in 2021, where they finished 7-6 and won the Myrtle Beach Bowl. Kevin Wilson's looking to take his high-powered offense from Ohio State to get Tulsa back on the map, making bowl games on the regular, and fighting to win the American Athletic Conference that has now lost 3 of their best members in Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston. The American is now looking for someone to take over the conference, and Tulsa could be that team with Kevin Wilson at the helm. They are doing that with also high-power recruits like Braden Presley and Julian Simon from Oklahoma State and USC, respectively. In 2022, Tulsa lost many close games, including Wyoming in 2 overtimes, Ole Miss on the road by 8, lost to Cincinnati, SMU, Tulane, and Memphis by 2 scores, and the only blowout they lost was Navy, losing by 32 in the middle of the season. In 2023, their schedule does not get any easier as they go on. They have 2 tough non-conference opponents in Washington and Oklahoma in the first couple weeks of the season, but start off with Arkansas Pine Bluff, which should be an easy win for Tulsa. The last non-conference game against Northern Illinois, which is a very winnable game if they can get their system in place with Kevin Wilson's high-powered offense, which averaged 524.1 yards per game and 43.6 points per game at Ohio State. Tulsa then begins conference play with Florida Atlantic, the new school from the Conference USA, and then Rice as well. Those are 2 very winnable games for Tulsa, and can immediately show that Tulsa is in fact in the fight for the American Athletic Championship, which they've not been a part of any conference championship since 2012, where they won the Conference USA Championship over UCF. Then the schedule gets a little tougher. They play SMU, Tulane, and North Texas in 3 of the 4 weeks, with getting a break with another expansion team, Charlotte, that came over from Conference USA as well. Then they finish off the season with East Carolina, which is also a very winnable game for Tulsa, which could put Tulsa in the conference title race late in the season. Tulsa is looking to get back to a bowl game, like I said. They haven't made a bowl game since 2021, and are looking to just get that consistency back that they had in the early 2010s. Kevin Wilson is the coach to do that. He is bringing over, as you can see, Braden Presley from Oklahoma State, bringing over recruits like that. He did get hired late in the recruiting cycle and did not get a full class together. So I would say that the recruiting class like C.J. Turner, De'Amari Smith, Kason Carpenter, those don't show what Kevin Wilson can do recruiting-wise. I think 2023's recruiting class will be the true view of what Tulsa is going to be in the future. But I do expect Kevin Wilson to try to hit Oklahoma recruiting hard in state recruiting, and it's going to be a little tough with Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, the 2 Power 5 schools in the state, especially with Oklahoma leaving for the SEC. I think that's going to be a little tough to recruit against, but I think the recruits those 2 schools don't go after could be the targets for Tulsa. Maybe you can steal a couple. Maybe Kevin Wilson has a better chemistry and environment for those recruits to come to, and maybe they choose Tulsa over those 2 schools. Along with that, on the defense side of the ball, Tulsa needs to get better on that, as last season they were not great through the air passing-wise. As the offensive stats don't really mean anything with a new head coach, as I already gave the Ohio State stats. But defensively, Tulsa has to kind of figure out a way what they want to do. Can't just rely on offense only, as we've seen with previous teams. That doesn't work very well. Have to have a very balanced attack. And I do believe Kevin Wilson can get that ready for Tulsa. It'll be interesting to see how they go up against the 2 Power 5 opponents they have early in the season. Going to Washington will be tough, but if they put up a tough fight, I really think that's how you can tell whether Tulsa's turned around or not. And then Oklahoma is also very interesting, because Oklahoma was not very good last year, finishing 6-7. Defense was not great. So if they have a very good offense and Oklahoma's not fixing any of the issues, which we have no idea whether the defense issues are fixed or not, they had a very good recruiting class. Nonetheless, if they're able to move the ball really well and put up a fight against Oklahoma, I do think it's another telltale sign that Tulsa is ready to get back to where they were in the early 2010s and fight their way into the American Athletic Conference. Like I said, the American has a void as their leader with Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston leaving. It's up for grabs who's going to take over that conference. There's not really a strong team left. SMU's debatable, and Memphis there too. But Tulsa doesn't play Memphis. They avoid that. SMU's the really only tough game on the road. They play Tulane too, who won the American last year. but Tulane might be down, losing a couple players. So Tulsa is in prime position this year. They have a decent schedule. The schedule is very favorable for them to run the table in the American and potentially make the American Conference Championship game, which ultimately is their goal. They want to make a bowl game. Haven't appeared at that in a little bit. But if they can get to the American Conference Championship, I think that can help the recruiting-wise in the American 14 teams that they're going up against and propel Tulsa to the top of the American and to run that conference. And conference realignment is not over. If you're able to start running the conference, Tulsa is a okay market to look for. I know Oklahoma City's are taken over by the SEC and Big 12, but Tulsa's a place where, potentially the Big 12 might want to go after to get two schools back in Oklahoma. So there's all sorts of things that Tulsa has to start worrying about, whether or not they want or how they succeed in the future. The other non-conference game they play early in the season is at Northern Illinois, which I do think is a win. I think they're going to win that too. Arkansas Pine Bluff, the first game is a win. I'll have 2 losses with Washington, Oklahoma. As much as I think they're going to improve, I don't think they're going to win that game. I just think even if it's close, those 2 schools have a lot of experience, and I think they'll be able to pull it out, even if it's a close game. I think they'll beat Temple at home, beat Florida Atlantic on the road. 2 schools that are not very good. Rice as well, I think they'll win. I'm going to have a loss to SMU on the road. I think that's just their first big, tough game on the road in conference play, and I just don't know if Tulsa will be ready for that type of environment in conference play yet, especially if they're in the title fight. That'll be a very environmentally friendly game for SMU and very harsh on Tulsa. Charlotte, I think, is to win on November 4th. I think they're going to get that done, especially with Charlotte in a new conference, trying to find their footing of where they stand. Another close game with Tulsa, I think, is going to be at Tulane. I think it'll be a close game, but I think once them going to SMU will give them experience of what they need to do, and I think they'll go pull it out in New Orleans and beat Tulane, as well as they'll beat North Texas on the road, gaining momentum with their win from Tulane, and they'll finish off with a win against East Carolina, and that'll put them at 9-3 on the season and 7-1 in the conference, which should be good enough to at least have a fight in the American Conference Championship game. It also depends what Memphis does, since they don't play them. They'll lose the tiebreaker to SMU potentially, so that could hurt. But nonetheless, they'll be in the title fight. They'll be in a bowl game, which they haven't appeared since 2021. All these will help Tulsa recruiting-wise, as Kevin Wilson still needs to get his footing for 2023 and potentially get better than 3 stars and people that aren't even ranked in the recruiting system. I think Tulsa could potentially start looking to get some little 4 stars that go under the radar for some of the Power 5 schools, especially if Oklahoma and Oklahoma State don't go after them. This season's very important for Kevin Wilson of how he can. It'll depend what direction Tulsa goes. If they have a very bad season, I could see that derail his coaching career, at least for the start of Tulsa. As we saw with Indiana, it didn't go very well as he was in the Big Ten. Now he's in a conference where he could easily take over as the leader of the conference if everything goes to plan, which 9-3 in your first season at Tulsa, I think, especially with going 5-7 in the previous year for Tulsa with Philip Montgomery's last season, I think a 4-win improvement for Tulsa is a very good season for them in 2023.